we've seen a huge evolution of the kinds of institutions that these difference makers have built. If you look back in the history of all of this, it started in the early 1970s, very much in the late 1960s, with one or two organizations that got started, and then about 1995 you absolutely had this explosion of interest in corporate citizenship, corporate responsibility, corporate social responsibility, business ethics, name it what you will. And in part I think that happened because of the visibility that came with the internet, and companies could no longer hide. In part it came because globalization had by then really exploded, and people were very critical of a lot of practices that companies were engaging in, especially those companies had big, long supply chains in developing nations. Then their impact was clearly not positive in terms of the environment. And so you have this explosion happening in 1995, around 1995, and clearly continuing to the present. And so just earlier this year, it's 2008 now, so earlier this year The Economist, which has always been very critical of this whole movement, if you will, came out with a special issue that basically said, this is here to stay. Companies ignore this at their peril. And so I think what you've seen over the last 5 to 10 years is that companies are embedding this in their corporate practices. They're really becoming much more conscious of it, and companies that you wouldn't think of having these kinds of practices embedded in them are taking this very seriously and really aligning their values with sustainability. Now, some of that is clearly greenwashing or window dressing, but some of it I think is really real, because I sit on the advisory board for the Center for Corporate Citizenship, and I've heard a shift in the language of the way these companies, the other members of the companies, are talking, that suggests that, you know, they say things like, we're trying to get this into the DNA of the company. We're trying to make it real in the company. We're really trying to live these values. Now, I'll grant these are the leading edge companies. There's no question about that. So is it happening with all companies? No. But what you're seeing is this explosion of interest in things like some of the activities that the difference makers started. For instance, the UN Global Compact has now got, I think, 4,300 corporate members and about 5,600 members in total. Many small, many medium-sized, many big businesses. That's rather remarkable in about 8 years. Now, it's a small portion of all businesses, but nonetheless, it suggests that companies are really beginning to take this seriously. So I think issues of climate change, issues of responsibility, issues of accountability, the fact that companies are transparent, whether they want to be or not, are only going to make the whole notion of corporate responsibility, corporate citizenship, much more important over the next 5 to 10 years. Companies can't escape from it.